In today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, I'll tell you why Khaman Maluach from Duke is the perfect pick at 7 for this season and the future. Plus, is Ace Bailey just a terrible fit for New Orleans? It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with you on this Friday, and we're doing a deep dive into who the Pelicans should and maybe will be drafting, and it's Khaman Maluach, the center from Duke. I'll explain why in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. We're also going to look at Ace Bailey. Is he just like an awful pick for New Orleans, even if he's there at 7? And then we'll get into the 23rd overall pick as well. This is going to be a really interesting discussion, particularly around Ace Bailey and drafting for a guy that fits your team while also having upside. So, of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen to Locked On Pelicans Monday through Friday. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget, you can catch us 10:30 a.m. every single weekday on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. So let's get into this. I'm going to drop some draft intel in this show for y'all here. Khaman Maluach is probably the best pick the Pelicans could make at 7 overall. In the too long didn't listen part of this is, if you're trying to thread the needle of being able to develop a guy, but also play them right away and have them make a positive impact in winning, it's probably going to be Khaman Maluach. We'll get into this a little bit more with Ace Bailey in the next segment here. But I'm also saying this for a specific reason. And it's a little bit like self-serving here. I'm saying this about Khaman Maluach because what I've also been told is that the Pelicans really like him. He came in for a workout. It went exceptionally well, and the Pelicans seem really enamored with Khaman Maluach as a player. So if they end up drafting him, I can point to this show and be like, look what I told you, right? Like, there's some self-servingness to this. I will admit that here. But let's kind of break this down, and there's an interesting part of this, and it involves the Toronto Raptors. Reportedly so far, Khaman Maluach has worked out for the Wizards, the Hawks, the Pelicans, and he has that either, by the time you're listening to this, has happened or is upcoming with the Utah Jazz. What I'm watching for is if he works out for the Toronto Raptors, the 9th overall pick, right? I think that's where they are currently. So behind, let me pull it up just to make completely sure. Behind the Pelicans, yeah, they're at 9, 2 picks behind New Orleans. The Toronto Raptors also are reportedly very interested in drafting Khaman Maluach. They have a need for center. They're trying to move Jakob Poeltl. Getting your long-term center there makes a ton of sense. So they're really interested in him. But why, so far, has he not worked out for them and nothing been reported about a future workout? And the way that I kind of view it is this. If he doesn't work out for the Raptors before, say, Tuesday, right? The draft is on Wednesday. We're less than a week away. Then he might, and I'm going to stress might, have a promise from a team ahead of the Raptors. And that could easily be the Pelicans. If the Pelicans worked him out, really like him, and they go, shut it down, don't work out for anybody else, really, because if you're there at 7, we will take you. It's a draft promise. You hear those a lot, right? The question is, does Ace Bailey have a draft promise out there right now? And it's a valid question with how weird some of the things have been during his kind of lead up to the draft. But Khaman Maluach seems to be a guy New Orleans really likes. And if he doesn't work out for the Toronto Raptors, the Nets are taking him at 8. It really could be the New Orleans Pelicans who've promised that they will draft him. And why work out at that point? It can only hurt your draft stock. Keep that in mind as we see things. If he does work out for the Raptors, different story, right? But nothing's been scheduled from what I understand so far. That could change. So this gets into why he also makes sense as the pick, beyond me doing the show to be self-serving and make myself look good. Kind of joking with that. We'll go into this a little bit more with Ace Bailey, and it comes from the Locked On NBA Big Board Substack, right? The Pelicans are trying to compete next year. That kind of flies in the face of developing young players. If you're trying to win, want to win, get into the postseason, you often don't play those rookies who aren't contributing to winning right away. They take some time to develop, and it's usually by a player's third or fourth year that they contribute positively to winning. When you look at someone like Khaman Maluach, he can do both of these things. I think this is someone who would maybe be penciled in as a starter over Yves Missi, and it's nothing against Yves Missi, just the Pelicans need to add some size. Khaman Maluach at 7'1" with a 7'7" wingspan and a pretty high vertical gives you that size that they just are lacking right now. He averaged 1.3 blocks per game, and that size and the shot blocking ability he has is something the Pelicans are missing. That is not something that Yves Missi provided the team last year. He's got very good athleticism, very good timing and instincts on when to go up for those blocks. He projects as a long-term rim protector, right? His NBA comps are Rudy Gobert, Mitchell Robinson, but he can probably do some of that right now, and that's something that the Pelicans need. He's also a mobile defender. The Pelicans don't only play drop coverage. They tend to like to switch on the perimeter, and having a guy that can do that, and Missi can do this too, is really important, right? Like, he's comfortable switching in pick and roll situations as a defender, and that mobility makes him pretty good at blocking shots coming over from the weak side and being that help defender. So he can contribute on the defensive side of the ball, I think, immediately, and brings a dimension that the Pelicans are lacking. If you're looking for a rookie not to get buried or benched under head coach Willie Green, it's going to be with defense. That's what's going to get you on the court and keep you on the court under the Pelicans head coach. So if you're trying to draft a guy that just won't kind of have a redshirt year next year, you need someone who's going to be solid defensively. Maluach definitely projects as that. He's also, a guy that I think is a vertical spacing threat. He's got very good hands. He caught a ton of lobs at Duke. He needs someone to get him the ball, but you're going to have Zion be able to do that. You're going to have DeJounte Murray when he comes back. And in the third segment, we'll talk more about guards that you could kind of plug and play. So that also kind of factors into it too, that I do think he just makes sense offensively and defensively for this team. Another aspect to think about it is this. If you draft a guard here, say it's Jeremiah Fears or Con Knipple on the wing, you still have this glaring hole they want to improve upon when it comes to the center position. Yes, I like Maxine Reynaud. I like Thomas Sorber and some of those other guys. Their ceilings are nowhere near what Maluach's can be at the NBA level. I think some of the guards you could get at 23 have pretty good ceilings there too. So if you're looking of positional need, upgrading the center spot is going to be tougher unless you draft Maluach at 7. Sorber is a similar-ish player, I think, to Missi that I don't know if I would love that pick, even though I like Sorber. Reynaud is a different type of player, but is he going to be elite in the NBA? Probably not. Could you get a Walter Clayton Jr. at 23rd? And if you can, I love that idea because I do think he's NBA ready. So when you look at this, right, in terms of addressing the needs that you have, it's probably easier to find a guard or point guard elsewhere later in the draft or in free agency than it would be to upgrade your center position. And look, you're not getting Miles Turner. I don't think they're going to be able to get Jarrett Allen. And if you can't upgrade it that way, the best thing to do would be draft a center, Maluach at 7, and then address your other needs in other areas where you can do so, where you wouldn't be able to do it with the center position. So when you look at all of that, right, it kind of makes sense that Maluach maybe should be the pick for the New Orleans Pelicans. And maybe he already is in their mind, depending on how that workout potentially goes or doesn't go with the Toronto Raptors if it never happens. But some intel I wanted to share with y'all in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. They really like him. Keep an eye on if he works out for the Raptors or not. I think that's going to be pretty interesting. You're also seeing the Raptors kind of put some stuff out there. Well, if Maluach isn't available, there's an article written about this. If Maluach isn't there at 9, they're looking to try and trade the pick. A lot of smoke this time of year. You know, it's smokescreen season. Believe what you want to believe, grain of salt and all of that. But this kind of lines up and makes a lot of sense and just kind of fits what New Orleans needs. Do you like the idea of Maluach at 7? Do you hate that idea? Let me know in the comments down below. Maluach does look like eventually he'd be able to shoot the 3. Look, over 75% field goal percentage, in college in his 1 year. That looks really good. He's a really intriguing player, I think, here. So coming up next, what the heck is going on with Ace Bailey? And if he's there at 7, do you just have to take him, or is he a bad fit for New Orleans? We're going to talk about that because there's a couple quotes I want to read for you. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Car Gurus. Y'all know I'm a big car guy. I got a couple. I work on them all myself. Look, shopping for a car should be one of the most, in my opinion, exciting things that you can do. Not exhausting. But look, between confusing prices, hidden fees, it can feel pretty overwhelming. So that's why I recommend Car Gurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the US. They're going to verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without having to second guess yourself. It's no wonder that SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. So if you're looking that you need, for a place where you can find a deal you can trust, Car Gurus is going to make it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings. So buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com and make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com, cargurus.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Look, if you're running an office, you got a waiting room, something like that, make sure channel 7.1 in New Orleans is on from 10 a.m. to noon. We got Locked On Saints, Locked On Pelicans, Locked On LSU, and Locked On SEC. By the way, if you're driving by, check this one out. If you're driving by the Smoothie King Center, you might see the Locked On Pelicans, Locked On Saints logo on the big advertising board right there. That's pretty cool, in my opinion. What the heck is going on with Ace Bailey? What the heck is going on? Oh, no, sorry. For your second listen, the Locked On NBA Mock Draft Show, 5-episode series with the most comprehensive NBA draft analysis that you can get anywhere. Find the 2025 Locked On NBA Mock Draft on NBA Big Board and Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. So what's going on with Ace Bailey? He has not worked out for any team. Had a workout set with the 76ers at 3 and then canceled it. And it's leading questions of, is he getting bad advice? Is he trying to dictate where he goes? Or somewhere in the middle? I found something very interesting, and it reminded me a lot of Dyson Daniels, Jordan Hawkins, and a couple of other, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and a couple of other picks New Orleans has made. And while, yes, you want to go for upside too and be able to develop your guys, fit in the right situation is really important. And we kind of talked about that with Khaman Maluach, right? If he wasn't a good defender, he wouldn't get minutes and he would be stuck on the bench. And would he develop, or would that pick kind of be wasted? Dyson Daniels has spoken about this too. I don't think he was out there trashing the team in the interviews he's done. He really wasn't, right? He's like, yeah, there's just some bad injury luck. And like, hey, I was too worried about getting benched so that I couldn't really just play free and like myself. And then I came to Atlanta, wasn't worried about that, and it allowed him to become the player he was, right? When you're competing, you can't have rookies that are costing you wins when you're trying to make the playoffs. It's an important thing. It's this dichotomy. It's tough. Can the Pelicans afford to have that type of thing? Ace Bailey is rumored to want to go to a team where he's going to be able to start right away, get shots up, and basically be the focal point of their offense. That's not Philly. That's not the Charlotte Hornets. I don't even know if that's New Orleans here, and we'll get to that more in a second, right? That could be Utah, I think. That could be the Wizards too, or, the Brooklyn Nets, or less so the Toronto Raptors. So maybe he's doing this to just steer himself to a good situation. So on the surface, this looks stupid. And him not working out and doing all this, you're like, is he getting bad advice? Is that a type of player you want? Is he too arrogant? What is it? There's more to it, and I'm going to read you something from the Locked On NBA Big Board, Rafael Barlow, who's on the show earlier in the week, and his Substack here because I found this exceptionally insightful. So I'm going to read this whole thing. So roll with me here. Quote, "One thing I always try and do is stay objective and see the draft process through multiple lenses. So let's step back and look at this from the perspective of Ace Bailey's camp. From a strategic standpoint, their actions, however unconventional, could be a part of a bigger picture focused on long-term development. It's not hard to find recent examples of talented young players whose growth stalled because they landed in situations that weren't built for rookies to develop at their own pace. Just look at last year's draft. Reed Sheppard, widely considered the best shooter in the 2024 draft class, went number 3 overall to the Houston Rockets. Sheppard had a stellar freshman year at Kentucky, an elite 52% from 3. Despite that, he struggled to crack the rotation in Houston, averaging just 12.6 minutes over 52 games. Rocket head coach Ime Udoka clearly favored veterans in their playoff push, and Sheppard often looked tentative when he did see the floor, a product, in my opinion, of a confidence hit due to inconsistent minutes. His Kentucky teammate, Rob Dillingham, saw a similar rookie arc. Dillingham was taken 8 overall by the Spurs, then traded to Minnesota, where he averaged just 10.5 minutes and 4.5 points over 49 games on a team that made a deep run to the Western Conference Finals. One of the things that has me a little bit concerned about Rob Dillingham is the fact that he is a small guard. One of the most electrifying players I've ever scouted at the high school level, whose game is fueled by elite self-confidence, improvisational creativity, and his ability to color outside the lines. What concerns me is, what happens if Rob Dillingham starts looking over his shoulder? What if he starts playing to avoid mistakes rather than playing free, like the Rob Dillingham that made him special? He's already on the smaller side, and that self-confidence and freewheeling offensive style overcompensate for his physical limitations. If he loses that edge, then what do you have? And I think that's something that we have to at least consider when we look at how player confidence and team context intersect. So I'm going to go back to reading a few more things about this, but that's very insightful, right? And I've long said this about Dyson Daniels. It was just never going to happen here because the situation wasn't set for him to succeed. So you can do all of this great drafting, draft guys with very, very high talented ceilings, but if they're not put in position to succeed or to develop, is it going to work out, right? You kind of look at that a little bit with Jordan Hawkins here. You look at it definitely with Dyson Daniels, and that's what I'm concerned about with Ace Bailey. Let's read a little bit more about him here. In Ace Bailey, quote, "In Ace Bailey's case, you see a similar blueprint. His game is also built on confidence, especially in his ability to take and make tough shots. So what happens if he lands in a system that doesn't allow him to play with the same rhythm, the same freedom? If he's on a short leash or constantly looking over his shoulder, could that chip away at the self-belief that makes his shot making so special? Confidence plays a huge role in success, not just in basketball, but in life. And maybe that's what Bailey's camp is thinking about. Maybe this isn't about entitlement or avoiding competition, but avoiding a situation that chips away at his strengths. Because we've all heard the saying, confidence is 90% of the game. And in the modern NBA, it's often the confident, mistake-resilient rookies who rise while the ones constantly second-guessing themselves fade fast. This is why maybe Maluach makes a ton of sense for the Pelicans here, right? You're not worried about that. He'll play. He's not going to get pulled and then wonder, what am I doing wrong, and have this kind of inconsistent tenure, right? We were worried about that with Trey Murphy, his rookie. He played under 15 minutes per game when we could see the talent, and we were worried it was going to derail some of it. You even saw that in his second year under head coach Willie Green. We're not going to get into this philosophy around Willie Green right now. It is just a fact that this is how he kind of operates. Do you want to put a rookie into that situation where maybe this won't work out for him, or do you just want to draft a guy with your head coach in mind, knowing that this is a good situation for him to succeed? If you put Ace Bailey on this team, would he succeed despite all of his talent and despite having one of the higher ceilings where, at 7, maybe it's the no-brainer pick, but would it just happen in New Orleans or not? And I tend to lean that Bailey's not a bad fit for the Pelicans. The Pelicans could be a bad fit for Ace Bailey and his development. So you need to keep that in mind. And that also says something larger about this team as well, right? Quote, "And this isn't new. Just look at Golden State. James Wiseman, the number 2 pick in 2020, never found his footing in a veteran-heavy system. Jonathan Kuminga, pick number 7 in 2021, has shown clear flashes of upside, but his development has also been uneven, in part because of inconsistent playing time. Some scouts and agents believe Golden State's approach has cost Kuminga's developmental momentum and possibly even long-term contract value. There have even been reports of frustration from Kuminga's camp, with his name frequently surfacing in rumors," end quote. This is why I've said the Pelicans kind of need to pick a direction. This is why early on in our mock draft, and we redid it, after the Zion stuff that I traded him away and was like, we're going to rebuild this team. We're not going to be as competitive as we could be. And why I've said maybe the Pelicans need to just go for a rebuild, as painful as it is. It helps with development. If you're going to try and thread the needle, right, of development and competing, Maluach or a guy like Khaman Maluach is probably the safest pick. Jeremiah Fears, I love. But if he's not going to be able to play his style here, is that going to work? And the answer is probably no. So thinking about that in mind and that lens when looking at who the Pelicans should take, it does make certain guys kind of rise up more. Whether that's the correct approach or not, that is the approach that the team is likely taking right now. Different discussion for another day, but keep that in mind when draft night comes and we look at this situation for the Pelicans. And also kind of lend some good context on what Ace Bailey is doing, that even if the Pelicans take him and you're like, what the heck, he wouldn't work out for everyone, that's big red flags. Maybe not. Maybe it is. Maybe not, though, too. And I think it's worth looking at all of those perspectives. But I do think, kind of thinking about that, maybe Ace Bailey isn't the best fit here in New Orleans, also for Ace Bailey. So coming up next, some guys that could be good fits. That we're going to look a little bit deeper down into the draft, some guards that if you're taking Khaman Maluach at 7, what should the Pelicans be looking to do? That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. So if you're wanting to upgrade your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. And Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space. Conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits? Well, we don't need that here. Gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the price tag. I use Wayfair for all of my furniture needs. I don't have a truck. I'm not going to go to a store, get something to be able to lug it back. I need free delivery right to my door or the room that I want it in. And that's what Wayfair does. Delivery is free, fast, and totally hassle-free, even with really large items. So don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now and shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Make Locked On Saints your second listen today. I'm still curious who started on opening day. Ross Jackson is going to make sense of everything black and gold over at the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So if the Pelicans are taking, and I got to do this quick, Khaman Maluach at 7, I do think it opens the door for what you want to do at 23, right? You don't need as much of a developmental swing kind of guy there. You know, different mock drafts have a lot of guards available in that spot. So if you want to go big and guard, I think that makes a ton of sense, right? My ideal pick there at 23, and I don't know if he'll be available, is Walter Clayton Jr. I think he's going to be a very good player that doesn't have the highest ceiling at the NBA, but someone that is going to be able to contribute right away. He can draw 2 to the ball. He's a very good shooter. That's someone I like here, that you can get some of that guard depth, knowing that, okay, you drafted him at 23. The expectations are going to be very different for him than they would be at a player at 7. And thus that means he can have fewer minutes. You can pull him out of the rotation if you need to, right? There are even guys that are developmental prospects if you want to go for a big swing, like Nolan Traore from St. Quentin. He looks to be a very good downhill attacker, a guy that can really create for others. Needs to improve some of his decision-making, but he's quick too. And so I love that, right? You could even see someone like Yegor Demine fall. I don't think he'll be there at 22, 23, but there's potential for him to kind of be in that spot. There's Ben Saraf as well from Europe. There's a number of guys that I think make a ton of sense that you can draft and are going to come into a good position because their expectations are different. If you take a guard at 7, this is your lead guard, 2 guard of the future. And are you setting them up for failure given that you're trying to compete next year? You draft someone at 23, a Walter Clayton Jr., Look, if he's not getting minutes, you can send him down to the G League, and that's going to look fine. If you're trying to compete and you send your 7th pick down to the G League, that's probably not fine and isn't going to look good if you're trying to win games to make the playoffs. This is the difficulty of the situation the Pelicans have put themselves in of let's compete, but also develop for the future. 2 timelines is not great, in my opinion. That doesn't tend to work out at the NBA level. So draft someone who you know is a little bit, while developmental, has things that are going to make him stick. Khaman Maluach, Con Knipple, I think are those 2 guys that would be there at 7, could be there at 7 when it comes to it. And then you can kind of do whatever you want with 23. And it just takes some pressure off of that pick that they're going to kind of have a clear role, kind of clear developmental process. And look, Joe Dumars is very interested in making sure that this team is developing players in a very positive way. That is one thing that I've heard that he's really trying to build out is player development and be able to take guys that are undrafted or late in the first round and grow them over time to being elite NBA players. I think that's an important thing to do in a small market. That's a very smart decision from Joe Dumars as well. And I'm glad that he's starting to think long term about that too. And that will probably influence what they do in the draft and why they probably drafted or traded for that 23rd overall pick. So what do you think about Khaman Maluach? Is that the perfect thread the needle kind of guy? Do you think he's maybe even got a promise from the Pelicans? Let me know in the comments down below. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, this week of Locked On Pelicans, unless we get news over the weekend here. Next week, tons of draft coverage. I will be at the Pelicans facility on draft night. I will be going live from the Pelicans facility on YouTube after their pick is made at 7, or if any other things happen. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all next time.